When you think of Gothic romance and horror comedy, Lisa Frankenstein may not be the first film that comes to mind, but I'm here to tell you that it absolutely should be. Directed by Zelda Williams and written by Diablo Cody, also known for her work on 2009's Jennifer's Body, this film blends quirky humour with a reimagined take on the Frankenstein story, all while tapping into the 80s in a way that feels fresh, yet slightly underutilised. I have to be completely honest, I'm a little disappointed that this film didn't get the recognition I personally think it deserves. It has that sort of charm and wit about its style that reminds me of so many of these cult classics that I've come across. You know, the ones that take a while to find their audience, but when they do, they're almost instantly fan favourites. For me, Lisa Frankenstein felt like this gem that I almost instantly fell in love with. It's darkly funny with sharp dialogue and a surprisingly heartfelt story that explores teen angst, our obsession with beauty, and portrays it through the incredibly relatable lens of, well, reanimating corpses. Honestly, this film deserves so much more love, and I can't help but feel like it's destined for a bigger cult following, so today, I'd like to dive a little into why Lisa Frankenstein is one of this year's most underrated movies, and why it definitely deserves a spot near the top of your watch list. Before we get into that, once again, Future Media 13 Jordan here to say that if you do go on to enjoy this video, then leaving a like is a very good indication that I'm doing something right. I'm trying to do weekly uploads for the rest of the year, as much as it's already testing my patience, and if you don't want to miss out on any more of those ones, you can hit subscribe and the notification bell if you're really so inclined, but you know, I don't, as long as you subscribe, I don't really care about the other part. It really does help the channel grow, and with that little plug out of the way, I'll let the other guy get on with it. At its core, Lisa Frankenstein is a story about reanimation of both a literal and metaphorical nature. Set in the late 1980s, this film weaves together classic horror elements with the awkward, unpredictable experience of love. The plot follows Lisa, a misunderstood high school girl who stumbles upon a scientific miracle in accidentally resurrecting the corpse of a young man from many decades prior. Despite the name being featured heavily in the title, this isn't any ordinary rendition of the Frankenstein's monster that you might recognise. Lisa Frankenstein injects humour, heart, and a healthy dose of 80s saturation to tell a story about both physical and emotional transformation. Given the context of the tale, the use of Frankenstein's monster as a metaphor is brilliant, particularly for the adolescents that the film offers a perspective on. For Lisa, reanimating a corpse becomes a stand-in for trying to control and perfect her own life, especially her desire for love and acceptance. The movie cleverly plays around with this idea, blurring that line between creation and obsession, showing how we can often try to reshape ourselves or others to fit an ideal. The film mixes the grotesque with the romantic, capturing that sweet spot of tension between horror and heart in a way that feels very similar to how it was written in Cody's other major writing credit. Her sharp writing brings out the absurdity of teenage emotions, while the direction from Williams adds just that right amount of dark humour to make it all work together.
You look deadly. Half the school is headed to Boner Town and they don't even know it yet. Right, Daddy?
The film isn't just about stitching together a love interest from stolen body parts, it's about navigating those treacherous trials of growing up, where everything feels like it's being sewn together haphazardly. What sets Lisa Frankenstein apart from other things in its category is how it leans into the setting both visually and tonally. The late 80s were this time of vibrant colours, big hair and bold fashion, something brought back into the cinematic limelight due to the popularity of something like Stranger Things, as, you know, middling as that can be sometimes. And yet in my eyes, this movie is one of the best representations of that era because it doesn't feel as though it's missing something vital, something that makes it feel more human. Lisa Frankenstein embraces its aesthetic. The era shapes everything about the film, from the soundtrack to the costuming and even the character dynamics, giving this film a nostalgic energy that contrasts its darker themes. This isn't your typical dreary horror setting. The neon lights, mall culture and suburban backdrop offer this playful, almost whimsical take on the classic Frankenstein concept. It's a brilliant juxtaposition that uses over-the-top excess of the 80s to reflect the larger-than-life emotions that can come with adolescence. This setting in many ways actually is a character in itself. It amplifies that balance between both appearance and reality, which almost mirror Lisa's own internal struggles. While the town appears polished and perfect, much like Lisa's romanticised view of both life and love, there's this undercurrent of imperfection and decay lurking underneath that. That too also mirrors the Frankenstein story in a sense where beauty and monstrosity can also exist. Lisa Frankenstein mixes horror with humour and this rebellious teenage angst. It makes it so much more than a simple reimagining of Mary Shelley's novel. It's a fun, offbeat film that uses the genre mashup to explore deeper themes of transformation, acceptance, and the messiness of the coming of age, all while wrapped in this unforgettable aesthetic of the setting.
What? I thought that was a really cool thing to say.
Whether you're here for quirky humour, the horror presence, or the nostalgic energy that it carries in its bones, the movie delivers this surprisingly heartfelt and cathartic take on love and what it means to feel alive. In blending that trace of classic horror with teenage romance, Lisa Frankenstein is able to create this rich narrative that explores several themes such as identity, love, and, like I've mentioned already, transformation. At the film's heart is the on-the-nose adaptation of Frankenstein, not just as a horror figure but as a metaphor for change. Lisa's efforts to perfect the monster after its resurrection mirror the universal struggle of self-discovery. Like the monster, Lisa is still piecing together her own identity, navigating that often awkward and confusing process of growing up. The film uses the Frankenstein myth to highlight how teens attempt to mold their identities and relationships, sometimes with unintended and chaotic results. The film also delves a little into the theme of love, particularly Lisa's romanticised view of it and relationships. Her attempt to create the perfect partner reflects a fantasy, an idealised love that can be controlled and manipulated. However, Lisa Frankenstein simultaneously critiques this notion, showing that real love is far messier and requires vulnerability and acceptance of imperfection. The Frankenstein monster becomes a symbol of this, as Lisa's initial desire to mold him into her perfect partner eventually gives way to the realisation that love, like life, cannot be forced or fully controlled. The contrast between appearance and reality is another key theme. Lisa's obsession with creating the ideal boyfriend is symbolic of the societal pressures teens face to fit certain molds. As the monster defies her expectations, the film critiques how we often prioritise external appearances over internal truths. The Frankenstein myth is used here to challenge that idea that we can piece together an identity or a relationship that fits societal norms, only to find that reality is far more complex than we initially thought. Set against the backdrop of the late 80s, Lisa Frankenstein uses the decade's vibrant aesthetic and cultural shifts to deepen these themes. The neon colours, retro fashion, and synth-heavy soundtrack evoke this nostalgic surface, but underneath is a story about the fear of change and the inevitability of growing up. The 80s was a period marked by cultural transformation and serves as this visual metaphor for Lisa's own internal struggles as she grapples with the complexities of both love and identity. The film plays with traditional Gothic horror tropes, using Lisa's dramatic gestures to parody the genre's heightened emotions. While Lisa does see herself as a heroine in a grand romance, her actions are a lot more naive than she realises. This playful contrast between Gothic melodrama and modern sensibilities adds fun and irony. It underscores this film's deeper message of true growth, not only coming from the romanticised fantasies, but from facing the complexities of life head-on. The visual energy that runs through Lisa Frankenstein is key to understanding its unique tone and depth. The film blends this bright, neon-soaked aesthetic with classic Gothic horror, creating this world that reflects the tension between Lisa's fantasy and the reality she's forced to confront. The 80s setting, with its bold colours, vibrant fashion and nostalgic set pieces, mirrors Lisa's romanticised view of love and life. She's living in this world of exaggerated teen fantasy, much like the pop culture of that specific time. Contrasting this is the darker Gothic visuals associated with the reanimated Frankenstein body. Brought to life in the briefest lapse of judgment and a poor choice of words, the traditional concept of the story contrasts sharply with that neon brightness of the world of Lisa Frankenstein. The visual split between life and death helps symbolise Lisa's struggle between the perfect life she envisions and the messy, unpredictable reality that she faces. The film's use of practical effects harks back to horror films of the 80s, grounding its fantastical elements in something a little more tangible. This choice adds a layer of unique authenticity to the monster, while the exaggerated visual contrasts serve as a playful nod to the classic myth. Lisa Frankenstein subverts audience expectations by juxtaposing the vibrant, over-the-top stylisation of teen romance with the macabre elements of Gothic horror. It creates this visual language that enhances both its humour and its emotional resonance. This fusion of style reflects Lisa's internal journey and the broader themes of transformation, identity, and that clash between reality and fantasy. When it comes to the performances in Lisa Frankenstein, Kathryn Newton and Cole Sprouse anchor this film with their portrayals of Lisa and the monster. Each brings this unique blend of charm, humour, and depth to their roles, perfectly capturing that balance of quirky romance and gothic horror. Starting with Kathryn Newton, her performance as Lisa is as heartfelt as it is darkly comedic. Newton portrays the teenager as someone longing for a little control over her life in a chaotic world, and she nails that balance between vulnerability and determination. At times, she's naive and self-absorbed, but Newton ensures that she is always sympathetic and relatable. It's those subtle, awkward expressions and quirky mannerisms that ground the character and give her this unique charm. Newton brings a sincerity to her character's romanticised view of life, making her more than just this stereotypical teenager, instead becoming a young woman who's earnestly trying to navigate her emotions and sense of self. Whether she's delivering deadpan lines or heartfelt moments, Kathryn Newton's ability to shift between comedy and emotional depth adds so many layers to this role. It makes her performance stand out for some time, but we're no stranger to this because this is something that she's been doing across the horror genre for quite a while now. On the other hand, Cole Sprouse delivers this surprisingly complex performance. As a mostly silent character, he has to communicate a lot through his body language and muted facial expressions alone, which he does pretty impressively. His portrayal of the creature comes with both humour and tenderness, and you can't help but feel a little bit for this thing trying to make sense of the world around it. Sprouse plays the monster with this mix of innocence and confusion that underscores that metaphor of adolescent awkwardness and transformation. His wide-eyed expressions and cartoon reactions and clumsy movements almost add to this film's humour, but there's a layer of vulnerability to his character that brings an emotional weight to his scenes with Lisa. Together, they have this chemistry that plays into the film's more than unconventional love story. Their dynamic is offbeat, but it works perfectly for the tone of the film. Lisa's desire to control and mould this monster into her ideal partner contrasts with the monster's more innocent and genuine affection, creating this interesting push and pull in their relationship. It's this chemistry paired with their individual performances that elevates Lisa Frankenstein from a simple genre mashup to something a lot more emotionally resonant. Their performances breathe life into this film's eccentric premise, helping to create characters that feel both absurd and oddly relatable in this wacky, twisted, yet endearing narrative. Beyond its quirky premise and entertaining narrative, Lisa Frankenstein offers a layer of cultural commentary that speaks to the fears, desires, and anxieties of its characters, and by extension, of youth culture, both in the 1980s and today. At the heart of the film is this commentary on teenage obsession with perfection and control. Lisa's journey in reanimating the dead and moulding her ideal partner reflects this broader cultural fixation on creating and controlling an image of perfection. This echoes a modern-day obsession with creating perfect versions of ourselves on social media, where the line between reality and fantasy is often very heavily blurred. Lisa's Frankenstein monster is a literal manifestation of this idea, a person she tries to build and shape according to her own desires. But the film simultaneously critiques this impulse by showing that unintended consequence of forcing perfection onto something or someone that's inherently flawed. In a way, the film highlights this pressure that teens face to conform to impossible standards, be it through physical appearance, relationships, or even social status. The film's late 1980s setting is also crucial to its cultural commentary. The decade is often remembered for its bold fashion, excess, and consumerism, and Lisa Frankenstein uses these elements to reflect the character's superficial desires. The neon lights, vintage clothes, and MTV-style aesthetics all evoke this time when appearances mattered more than substance, a theme that's clearly woven into this film. Lisa, much like many teens of that era, is caught up in surface-level concerns, how she looks, how others perceive her, and how to build the perfect life, love, and image. This mirrors that larger societal attitude of the 80s, which was marked by materialism and a have-it-all mentality. The film uses this nostalgic setting to highlight the dangers of focusing too much on appearances while ignoring the complexity that sits beneath the surface. In many ways, it's a playful yet pointed commentary on the darker side of adolescence, the desire to control one's image, the fear of imperfection, and the struggle to navigate real versus idealized versions of love and life. By grounding its themes in both 1980s culture and timeless teenage struggles, Lisa Frankenstein uses humour, horror, and romance to keep itself relevant and reflect the cultural anxieties of both its characters and the audience. So as I find myself here in the closing point, I now have to address the answer of what makes Lisa Frankenstein stand out. It's a film that takes risks, it blends genres, it blends tones and aesthetics in ways that feel both fresh and nostalgic at the same time. Sure, it does lean into familiar Gothic tropes, but it does so with this modern sensibility and humour that's hard to resist. From Kathryn Newton and Cole Sprouse's captivating performances to the film's vibrant yet dark visual energy, every element works in harmony to create this unique experience that I've not really felt for a while in a film to this degree. At the heart of it all, Lisa Frankenstein is more than just some quirky horror comedy. It's a reflection of the complexities of adolescence, that pressure to fit in, and the messy reality of love and identity. It uses the Frankenstein myth to explore themes of transformation, control and imperfection, all while wrapped in that unforgettable 80s aesthetic that has become so prevalent in our modern media. In an era where so many original films struggle to stand out, Lisa Frankenstein deserves more attention than what it's gotten. Whether you're drawn to the film's biting humour, its sharp commentary on culture, or its clever reimagining of a classic tale, this is a movie with depth beneath its playful surface. It's the kind of film that's likely going to grow in appreciation as more people discover it, and it already has done so on streaming. If you haven't, I highly recommend giving it a watch because you never know, you may just fall in love like I did.